Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out evil spirits and to heal every disease and sickness.
The Bible contains remarkable stories of miracles and divine interventions. Moses parted the sea. Peter healed a man lame from his mother's womb. Jesus drove demons out of people and raised others from the dead. But are these types of events still happening today?
We too have a beam of divine light and guidance that God has put within the heart of every man. And it's one of the greatest proofs that there is a God.
More amazing supernatural things are happening than we realize.
This is Divine Intervention, the interview show that features intriguing people who've experienced the hand of God in amazing ways. Divine Intervention was created and produced with the purpose of encouraging believers, spiritual seekers, and skeptics alike that Jesus is alive and is still performing miracles and working in the world today.
I believe in miracles.
Here's your host, Daniel Fazina.
Hello, friend, and welcome to Divine Intervention Radio. I'm your host, Daniel Fazina, and I am so excited, blessed, and privileged to be able to come to you with another exciting episode of Divine Intervention Radio. And I have a wonderful guest in store for you today, and it's going to be very informative and inspirational and uplifting. I'm going to be interviewing one of my heroes, Dr. Kent Hovind, who is a Creation Science Evangelist. Before we get to our special guest, I just want to remind you that you can connect with us on YouTube. Divine Intervention Radio is a channel there. You can check out all the archives of the show if you miss any. And you can also find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Divine Intervention Radio. And of course, you can connect with me, Daniel Fazina, on Twitter. That's at DanielFazina1 on Twitter.com. That's at DanielFazina, the numeral 1, on Twitter.com. I'd love to hear from you and keep in touch with you. All right. Have you ever thought about the questions of life, such as, is the Earth millions of years old, like the evolutionists teach? Or is it merely thousands of years old, like the Bible teaches? Where do the dinosaurs fit into creation? Evolution teaches that dinosaurs died out millions of years before man got here, and yet the Bible seems to indicate that all of creation was made in 6 days, all the animals as well, which would include the dinosaurs. Has anyone ever seen a living dinosaur? Is there any evidence of this? Is there any evidence that people lived with dinosaurs all throughout history, like the Bible teaches? Does the Bible even mention dinosaurs? Well, we're going to tackle questions like this and many more, and also hear the amazing testimony of Dr. Kent Hovind as we delve into this amazing subject. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Hovind before we introduce him. Dr. Kent Hovind taught high school science and math for 15 years before beginning the ministry of Creation Science Evangelism in Pensacola, Florida in 1989. His fast-paced, highly illustrated, and humorous seminars have been translated into over 40 languages. He defends the biblical worldview that heaven and earth were created in 6 days about 6,000 years ago. He also defends the Bible as being the inspired, infallible, inerrant word of the living God. He has debated over 100 evolutionists and atheists in various universities around the world. 20 of these debates, as well as his 18-hour seminar series DVDs, are available on drdino.com. He answers questions and has a Bible study on his YouTube channel, Kent Hovind Official. Dr. Hovind travels within the United States, and he's happy to conduct creation science seminars where invited. He does not charge to speak, and those interested in having him come to their church may contact his booking secretary at drdino.com. Now, Dr. Hovind was incarcerated from November 2nd, 2006 until July 2015 after a long and frustrating battle with the IRS. He was sentenced to 10 years for alleged violations of IRS structuring codes in relation to his church ministry. His stand for his beliefs have cost him dearly, taking a heavy toll on his health, his marriage, and his family. He continues to hope that the case will be overturned and the ministry exonerated of all charges. While incarcerated, Kent wrote 38 books and won countless souls to Christ. Upon his supervised early release, he returned to his Creation Science Evangelism ministry, speaking at various gatherings across the United States. He's working to rebuild Dinosaur Adventureland, a hands-on science center in its new location at 488 Pearl Lane in Repton, Alabama. And again, his website is drdino.com, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kent Hovind right now on Divine Intervention Radio. Dr. Hovind, welcome to Divine Intervention Radio. So great to have you.
Well, thank you, sir. It's good to be with you.
All right. Well, you've had an amazing life and ministry so far, and we definitely want to get to that. There's so many questions we can delve into regarding creation and dinosaurs and evolution. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Who is Dr. Kent Hovind, and how did you come to know Jesus, and then how did you get into ministry?
Well, if you go way back, my great-great-great-great-grandpa was Adam, and then Eve was Grandma, and then more recently Noah, his family. But
I think we're cousins.
My grandparents all moved from Norway back in the late 1800s because of the economic depression in Norway, so they settled in Wisconsin. My parents raised in Wisconsin and got married and moved to Peoria, Illinois, where I'm from. I was raised in a family of engineers and teachers. My dad was an electrical engineer. My oldest brother was a mechanical engineer. My mom and next older brother were both public school teachers. And when I was 16, I got saved, gave my heart to the Lord. And I guess because of the family I was in, we always tried to analyze everything, maybe overanalyze it. I began studying the Bible intently as a 16-year-old, read it through 3 or 4 times a year, and began really soaking my brain in that book. And I quickly realized that what the Bible teaches is very different than what I was learning in school.
Yes, right.
I was majoring in math and science, ended up being a math and science teacher for 15 years. I taught algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and biology, earth science, and physical science in high school and junior high, and 2 years in college, anyway, for 15 years. So I've always been interested in this topic and realized, here the textbooks say the earth is billions of years old and dinosaurs died millions of years ago. And the Bible clearly says everything was made in 6 days, and nothing died until Adam sinned. So I said, wow, somebody is seriously wrong, like big time wrong. And so in 1989, we moved to Pensacola, Florida, so my wife could finish her music degree. Moved the wife and 3 kids and a dog, to Pensacola. And the neighbor kid, and we got settled in a house, he said, would you like to take the paper? I said, no, I don't have a parakeet. And he said, well, if I have an extra one, could I throw it in the yard? Maybe I can talk you into it. I said, sure. So he threw one in the yard one day, and an article in there said dinosaur bones were found in Montana from 80 million years ago. So I wrote my first ever letter to the editor, Pensacola News Journal. And I said, no, these bones they found are from a dinosaur that drowned in the flood. The world is not millions of years old. It's about 6,000 years old. Everything lived at the same time. Dinosaurs were big lizards that lived with Adam and Eve. Because before the flood, the people lived to be 900. Something was different back then. Anyway, so they published my letter and started a war in Pensacola in the News Journal. Articles raging back and forth, calling me stupid and me answering and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, finally some students said, hey, would you come debate our professor at the University of West Florida? We're reading all your letters to the editor in our anthropology class. I said I would be thrilled. So I came and did my first ever debate at UWF. That would have been, I think, late 89 or early 90, and that launched me full-time, traveling, speaking at churches and schools and university debates. I've had 160 now.
Wow.
Debates. And, yeah, it's full-time traveling, defending the Bible as being scientifically accurate, and
wow.
evolution theory as being stupid.
That is amazing. It's funny how God works and how one thing kind of leads to another, and I'm sure you weren't actively looking for a ministry. I mean, you were a teacher, but it's just wild how God works sometimes. Friend, you're listening to Divine Intervention Radio. I'm your host, Daniel Fazina, and our special guest today is Dr. Kent Hovind. He's a Creation Science Evangelist. Dr. Hovind, I just want to tell you before we continue that you are a hero of mine. Your material really changed my life because, I was growing up in a public school, but also going to Lutheran church, also reading the Bible, and I never quite bought into the evolution theory and the millions of years thing, and I'm just trying to reconcile what the Bible is teaching with what I'm learning in school, but I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the evidence, the knowledge base to counter it. I didn't believe it, but I didn't know what alternative there was. And I think it was about 1999 or maybe early 2000, I prayed to God to show me the truth about certain things, and that's when my cousin gave me your seminar. And among other things I was praying about was the truth about the IRS and the income tax, because I was working. I was just out of college. I was making what I thought was a lot of money, and I ended up owing money to the IRS. And I'm like, this just doesn't seem right. It just seems un-American. And this happened two years in a row. And the second year, I actually had to take a bank loan to pay the IRS back taxes. And something just didn't seem right to my 25-year-old brain. It just seemed un-American. So I prayed, Lord, just show me the truth about this. And that was when I started watching your seminars. And, my mind was just opened, and I was just blown away by, how old is the earth? There's a lot of evidence to show that it's young. The dinosaurs living with mankind all throughout history, that was fascinating to me. Just jaw-dropping thing after jaw-dropping thing. And then, of course, when you go into the IRS income tax not being applicable to an American citizen living and working within the United States, I got to tell you, I spent years researching that. Went to the law libraries, looked through the Code of Federal Regulations, and you're right, I couldn't find a law that applied to a U.S. citizen, living and working in the States. So it just opened my mind tremendously. And I'm just thrilled that you were able to put together such an amazing DVD series. Friend, if you're listening to this, go to drdino.com and check out his work. His seminars are just amazing. Dr. Hovind, when you talk about dinosaurs, that's one of your big things. Like, how do you couch it, let's say, and how do you approach people who think that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago? What's the evidence that maybe they didn't die out? Maybe there are some still alive today.
Well, yeah, that's one of my favorite topics. Our website is drdino.com. Even our phone number, 855-BIG-DINO. Extension 1, if they want to get that seminar series you talked about. We've redone it about 25 times. Improved it, upgraded it. It's 18 hours covering all sorts of topics, including dinosaurs.
And it will blow your mind. It is amazing.
But we've got them in, I don't know how many languages. And anyway, so they can just call that office number and get one for $50. And then our policy has always been, after they've watched it, if they want to return it, they can get their money back, minus the shipping cost. So, or even watch it and copy it and send it back. We're just trying to win the world to Christ. But short answer. The Bible says very clearly in Genesis chapter 5 that Adam lived to be 930 years old. Noah lived to be 950. Methuselah was 969. Almost everybody, before the flood was living 900 years. Okay. Well, that's what it says. Now, it's also a biological fact that reptiles, like snakes and lizards, never stop growing. They will grow all their life. So if they were living in the same world, where people are living to be 900, it's reasonable to assume that probably everything is living longer, and reptiles living 900 years would get to be 60 feet long. So the dinosaurs that we're finding the bones of were simply giant reptiles that lived with Adam and Eve before the flood came. They would have all been friendly. According to Genesis chapter 1, everything ate plants. Read Genesis 1, 29 and 30. They were all vegetarian. And then after the flood, God told Noah, he said, now the animals are going to be afraid of you, and it's okay to eat meat. That's Genesis chapter 9. So the dinosaurs, short answer, would simply be giant lizards that lived with Adam and Eve. The bones are found in the dirt because of the flood. Animals die today and they don't fossilize. They get scattered all over the woods. The coyotes and the buzzards drag everything around. So to find dinosaur skeletons fully articulated, all the bones are still connected quite often. And they're usually in a swimming position, like they're drowning and mud coming up and covering them. So that's very frequently to find animals in a swimming position. All the bones fully articulated. And once the animal gets buried in the right conditions under mud, especially if there's a little pressure because it's, deep in the mud, 100 feet down with more mud on top, then the minerals get squeezed into the bones and you can actually fossilize them in a couple of years. Petrified trees are being found now at the bottom of Spirit Lake by Mount St. Helens. The trees that blew in 1980 are petrified.
Yeah.
Ending up.
And
just in 40 years, they turned to stone.
Yeah. I remember in your seminar you actually have pictures of people send you in like a fossilized cowboy hat or a cowboy boot, a fossilized finger of a human, all these things, fossilized crayon even. things that we know are not millions of years old, and yet they fossilize. They fossilize quickly.
We've got a fossilized teddy bear in our science center here, Dinosaurs Adventureland. We're in Lenox, Alabama, straight north of Dakota, 70 miles. Someone gave us property here a couple years ago. It's an old gravel pit, and it's amazing. We're building Creation Science Evangelism ministry here, our Dinosaur Adventureland. It's got a fossilized teddy bear. I've got a fossilized pickle. A guy called me from Montana. He said, hey, there's an old house out in our woods here. The roof is gone, the walls are falling down, but part of the pantry was still standing. And in the pantry there was a pickle jar. The lid rusted off, and the pickle inside turned to stone. Would you like it for your museum? I said, of course. Who would not want a petrified pickle? So on down.
That is hilarious. But all these pieces of evidence, they become a mountain, and they show you that, hey, look, it doesn't take millions of years to fossilize. Even stalagmites and stalactites, you go through caves, and the guides will say, hey, this took millions of years to fossilize. Well, not necessarily. In the flood conditions, things can happen really quickly. And you mentioned Spirit Lake. Mount St. Helens blew in 1980, and the topography around that whole area changed very rapidly.
Well, yeah, and they talk about stalactites taking millions of years. Just Google Thermopolis, Wyoming. It's famous for the huge flowstone formations. In 1902, I think it was, somebody stuck a pipe in the ground, and a well, and water came bubbling out the top of the well. Well, as it ran down the sides of the pipe, some of it evaporated and left behind a mineral deposit like you see on your sink sometimes, these orange spots. And it began putting a coating on the pipe, and it kept getting thicker and thicker. Today, it's been about 100 years now that's been trickling down. It's probably about 40 feet thick across.
Wow.
Just Google the Thermopolis, Wyoming, like thermo, like a thermos. It does not take millions of years. A guy called me one time. He said, Kent, I work at the Air Force base in Eglin Air Force Base near Pensacola, Florida. He said, we had a water pipe was dripping for about, I think he said 7 years or 13 years. The water pipe on the ceiling down in the basement was dripping, and it formed a stalactite 13 inches long. Yeah, that's it. 7 years, I think, 13 inches long. On the floor beneath it was a stalagmite, just like you see in a cave. It's about 2 inches tall, 1.5 inches in diameter. I've got that in my museum in Lenox here. It does not take millions of years. This stuff can happen rapidly with the right conditions, and the evolutionists they don't see it. See, they need millions of years to make their theory look good. If I told you a frog could turn to a prince if you kiss it, you'd say, come on, that's a fairy tale. But if I told you a frog could turn to a prince if you wait millions of years, oh, no, that's modern science. No, it's still a fairy tale. It doesn't happen. Frogs don't turn to anything but frogs.
That's right. Has anyone ever said to you or tried to use the transformation of tadpole into frog as evidence for evolution?
Well, they try, but they know full well that's simply metamorphosis. That's pre-design. I think I could show you that a pile of lumber can be transformed into a house.
Right.
Okay, well, that's because of an intelligent designer and somebody following a blueprint and a plan, and it takes work. To turn a tadpole to a frog takes an incredibly complex genetic code that's already in place in the tadpole. It never turns the tadpole into a bird or a fish. It's designed to turn it into a frog. That's not evolution. That's nothing similar to evolution. That is absolutely nothing but a pre-designed metamorphosis.
Okay.
Not evolution. And they know. When they get that desperate, they're really desperate.
Well, one of the things that really helped me when I watched your seminar is that you define the terms and you make distinctions between microevolution, which is variation among kinds, and macroevolution, which is the overarching big picture. Can you kind of clarify that for our listeners, for anyone who's not clear on that?
Well, the word evolution is very slippery. I've done 160 debates now, and you have to define the word. When someone says, do you believe in evolution? I say, well, I don't know. Which one are you talking about? First, you'd actually have to have cosmic evolution. That's the origin of time, space, and matter. Where did time come from? Where did matter? Where did space come from? We live in a three-dimensional world of space, length, width, height. So they would answer that and say, well, it came from the Big Bang. which is not an answer at all. But cosmic evolution, Big Bang, is completely religious. There's no scientific evidence for that. They choose to believe in it. Secondly, you'd have to have what's called chemical evolution. This Big Bang would have to produce all the 92 elements in our periodic table. And even by their theoretical calculations, they say the Big Bang would only produce hydrogen and helium, the first two. Okay, well, how do you get gold and silver and platinum from hydrogen gas? I'd like to learn how to do that.
Alchemy.
Yeah. So then you have to have this chemical evolution. Thirdly, you have to have stellar evolution. Somehow the stars have to form. Nobody's ever seen a star form. All we see are stars blow up. They never see one form. They don't even know how it could happen. There's not even a good theory. How do you get gas to condense to a solid without somebody else putting enormous pressure on it? Gravity's not going to do it. None of the clouds floating around in the sky have a gravitational attraction enough to turn them into a solid. So that'd be stellar evolution. Number 4, you have to have organic evolution. Somehow life has to get started. How do you get life from non-living material? I tell guys, if you put a frog in a blender and turn it on, in a matter of seconds you will have frog dog. Now you have all the chemicals to make a frog in one place. How long will it take to reassemble the frog and make it come alive? I'll tell you what, you get your frog nog, you can nuke it, microwave it, x-ray it, you do anything you want to the frog nog. Could you make it go back to a frog? And the answer is no. You have every single chemical necessary for a frog, but yet you can't get it together to make a frog. So just because you got all the chemicals in one spot does not mean it's going to create anything living. The idea of how life got started is a real puzzle to the evolutionists. It's real simple to me. God did it. So number 4 would be organic evolution. Number 5 would be macroevolution. That's where this first life form you finally end up getting turns into something else. No animal ever has produced anything other than its kind. Cows produce cows, dogs produce dogs. There are no exceptions. Every farmer in the history of planet Earth from every country in the world, whether he's raising plants or animals, will tell you they bring forth after their kind. Cows produce cows, corn produces corn. There are no exceptions, none. So evolution is a religion if they believe in what's called macroevolution, where an animal changes to a different kind. It just doesn't happen. Lastly, number 6 on the list, number 6 is microevolution. That's a variation within the kind. Now that one is science. You may crossbreed your dogs and get a big one or a little one, a Chihuahua or a St. Bernard if you work long enough. You could probably select the gene code of the existing dog to keep selecting the bigger ones. Every time you get puppies, keep the biggest ones. And pretty soon you might get, 100 years or so, get St. Bernards. Or keep selecting the smaller ones and you get a Chihuahua. Well, yay, that's interesting. Number 1, you're selecting a slice of already existing gene code. You're not getting wings. You're not turning it into a tomato. It's still a dog. And there are limits. You're never going to get a dog as big as Texas or as small as a flea. It's just not going to happen. So they're only selecting part of a gene code that already exists.
Wow.
If I gave you a pile of English letters from a Scrabble game, could you select a few letters and make some words out of it?
Of course.
Okay, if I gave you a pile of Scrabble letters, could you get a Chinese word?
Not with American English characters.
Not with English letters. That is correct. So selecting a pre-existing set of genetic information is only going to give you what it's limited to, which in the case of Scrabble is limited to English words. Now, if you just drop those letters, you may form a word, but you're much more likely to form a bunch of nonsense. You're very unlikely to create anything with any sensibility to it, just dropping letters. So in just arranging chemicals, you're most likely going to get nothing. To get a protein, well, that's maybe, but it's like dropping letters hoping to get a 20-letter sentence, because there's 20 amino acids in a typical protein, or 20 different amino acids. It's just not going to happen. So evolution is a religion unless you mean microevolution, which, as I said, is simple variation. It's not really what most people consider evolution.
Very important distinction, and I'm glad you clarified that. The terminology, like you said, it's a slippery one, and it can be confusing to people who don't know the definition. So thank you so much for that. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more of Dr. Kent Hovind on Divine Intervention Radio. Stay with us.
We'll be right back with more from Daniel Fazina and Divine Intervention right after this.
I believe in miracles.
Hi, I'm Kevin McCullough. You may know me from Fox News or Talk Radio. Have you ever wondered or pondered the idea of working for yourself or owning your own business? Using your skills to build a vision or a passion for your own life? Think about it. No boss, no politics, no compromise, no commute, no employees, no discrimination, and no educational requirements. Just building something positive that impacts people's lives. Well, you can get started owning your own energy company for less than $500. Would you like to know how? It's through a great company called Ambit. You can find out more when you go to freepowernow.com. That's freepowernow.com. Or if you're really interested in getting started, call my good friend Daniel Fazina, an independent energy consultant with Ambit. He's ready to help you get started on a brand new career. 205-55-AMBIT. That's 205-55-AMBIT or freepowernow.com.
Divine Intervention welcomes the support of Latirzo Associates, Certified Public Accountants. Latirzo Associates, Certified Public Accountants is a family-owned and operated Christian business serving their clients with quality accounting services for over 40 years, offering full-service accounting for any type of business, large or small, in any state of the union. Latirzo Associates, Certified Public Accountants, 12 Oak Street, No. 5, West Hampton Beach, New York, 11978. Phone 631-288-3334. That's 631-288-3334.
They say that Christians are a dead species. Then they worship macroevolution, monkeys for uncles in your history. Now that ain't working after we refute it. Then they tell you the Bible's dumb. Maybe then your sister was a ring to Lima. Maybe then a lizard was your mom. They got to insult us to sway others because they're missing the missing links. They got to lose the originator. They got to prove these other theories.
Welcome back to Divine Intervention Radio. I'm your host, Daniel Fazina, DivineInterventionRadio.com. If you're just joining us, we've been speaking with our special guest, Dr. Kent Hovind. He was a high school science and math teacher for 15 years before he was called into the Creation Science ministry. His website is drdino.com. Dr. Hovind, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me.
Sure thing. You know, before the break, we were talking about evolution and why it's kind of a slippery subject and the different definitions of evolution that we have to be aware of if we're going to be talking about the subject intellectually or intelligently with atheists and skeptics. And there are a lot of different areas we can go into, but one of the fascinating things that I found from your seminar series, when you talk about the Garden of Eden and what the pre-flood world was like, why does the scripture say that the patriarchs were living, multiple hundreds of years, some cases 900 plus? And what were the conditions like that would allow that? And you really do a great job of breaking that down on your video series. Can you talk about what the pre-flood conditions may have been like to allow such long lifespans?
Well, sure. In 2 Peter chapter 3, it says, in the last days, the scoffers would be willingly ignorant of the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment. They don't understand. What was that creation like? Why did they live to be 900? Well, if you read carefully Genesis chapter 1, it says in verse 6 and 7, when God made the firmament, which is later in verse 20, it tells us the firmament is where the birds fly. Obviously, that's, the atmosphere. When he made the firmament, it says there was water above the firmament. Well, the Jews have always taught it was a 2 to 3 finger thick, maybe a couple inch thick, layer of ice that completely surrounded the earth, like a big greenhouse. Today, the Earth's atmosphere, stretches out about 60 miles, but if you climb Mount Everest, which is 5 miles high, you can't breathe. There's just not enough air. Air's too thin. But if you could squeeze 60 miles of air down into, say, 10 miles, you would increase air pressure at the surface, maybe 10 or 15 or 20%. Okay. So if the pre-flood world did indeed have a crystalline canopy of ice above it, that would increase air pressure, and the ice would block some of the ultraviolet light and X-rays from the sun. So a canopy of ice around the Earth would do multiple things that would cause everything to live longer, blocking the UV light, blocking the X-rays, increasing the air pressure. It would also cause it to be, because of the slightly higher pressure, no clouds could form. You watch the weatherman. When it says high pressure today, there'll be no clouds in the sky. Low pressure forms clouds. So they would see, perfect weather all the time. And the Bible says a mist went forth from the ground and watered the plant. It seems there was a totally different watering system before the flood came. Instead of rain from above, it was like, water from beneath. 3 differences I'm aware of. Psalm 24 talks about how when God formed the earth, he formed it on top of the water. Today, most of the water is on top of the earth in the form of oceans and seas. But it's clear from Psalm 24, Psalm 33, and Psalm 136 that there was water in the crust of the earth. The Bible says the fountains of the deep broke open, and then the windows of heaven were open. So it only rained for 40 days in the flood, if you read Genesis 6 and 7. But the water kept coming up for 150 days. Well, then it's not all coming from rain if the water's coming up for 150 days. So 2 things happen. I think, number 1, the water that used to be inside the crust of the earth came shooting to the surface. The earth cracked up, and we still have the scars today. They're called fault lines. The earth broke up into plates, and the water underneath came shooting to the surface. This would probably launch rocks along the edge of these cracks out into space. If you get enough pressure, if you had 10 miles of rock on top of water, that's going to form like 30 tons per square inch of pressure. It would actually launch rocks away from our atmosphere. They might have gone up and be drifting in space until something smacks into them, like the moon. It could be on the moon came from Earth.
Interesting.
Anyway, I covered that on my video number 6, the Hovind theory. What happened during this flood? Because that's a critical thing. But before the flood, everything is living longer because of the very different climate conditions. It was just a different world. They had a perfect gene code. They were marrying sisters in the first generation.
Right.
Adam married his rib.
Yeah.
2,500 years later, God told Moses to tell the people, no more marrying close kin. Because now there's a genetic load that would create a problem. And if you marry closer than a first cousin, you're asking for disaster genetically. High probability of something wrong with your children if you marry closer than a first cousin today.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so the pre-flood world would have very different conditions, and they would live to be 900 years old, and probably never saw rain. I think when Noah said it's going to rain, they said, right, what's rain?
Right.
Probably had never seen it.
Right, the atmosphere was very different. The water was coming up from the ground, watering the plants. Very fascinating to look at how different things were back then. What also really helped me understand it is when you compared it to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Today we sometimes we use hyperbaric oxygen to treat things like loss of circulation. I know in diabetes, podiatry, they use it a lot to try and restore circulation if they have dead tissue. But you talk about increasing the pressure and the oxygen to promote healing. Can you talk a little bit about that and how the pre-flood world may have been hyperbaric?
Yeah, I think because of that high pressure from the canopy above. Now, there are some creation groups that do not believe there was a canopy above. Part of the problem is they don't have a Bible. They don't know which Bible is correct. You got to start with the King James. I've become very convinced that that is where God preserved his words. But the canopy is clearly taught in Genesis chapter 1. There was water above the firmament. That's what it says. So this would do multiple things: increase air pressure, make everything live longer. The plants would grow like crazy. There's good indication that the world used to have a much higher percentage of CO2. That's what plants live off of, CO2. The world today is about 0.06% CO2. 0.06 of 1% carbon dioxide. All the plants have to make it on that, you know. If you could increase the CO2 just by 50% or double it, you know, to 0.12%, and it might even have been up to 1 or 2% CO2, I don't know. But more CO2 makes the plants grow like crazy. So they find fossils of trees that are huge. Today there's a plant called a club moss. It gets about 15 inches tall out in the damp woods. 15-inch club moss. They find fossils of them 150 feet tall.
Oh my gosh.
Club moss. They find fossils of animals that are just ginormous. Today dragonflies or insects in general are limited on how big they can get because of the air pressure. They don't have lungs. They breathe through their skin. And so as an animal like an insect, if he's breathing through his skin, as his size increases, he gets more and more of a problem. It's called the surface area to volume ratio. He doesn't have enough skin to get enough oxygen in for all of his tissue inside. So today, 5-inch dragonfly is considered, big. But they find fossils of dragonflies with 50-inch wingspan.
50?
They find fossil cockroaches 18 inches long.
Oh my gosh.
No cockroaches 18 inches long today, praise God.
That's a big cockroach.
Oh.
Well, it stands to reason that, we're seeing giant lizards and megafauna in the fossil record. We're seeing plants that are a lot bigger than they are today. So it stands to reason that people were also a lot bigger. And the Bible does mention that there were giants in the earth in those days as well. Genesis 6 talks about the Nephilim, the sons of God going into the daughters of men and tinkering with the gene code and all this other stuff that you can really go into a rabbit hole with. But if the fossil record indicates that the people or the animals were a lot bigger and the plants were a lot bigger, does it stand to reason that the people could have been a lot bigger than they are today as well?
Well, see, modern scientists have convinced us that evolution is true and man used to be itty-bitty like a chimpanzee and we're getting bigger, better, stronger, smarter, and wow, aren't we, pretty soon we're going to be God. They've convinced us of that lie. The truth is, I think people were much bigger. If you found a 16-foot tall human skeleton, they wouldn't classify it as human. They'd say, oh, this has got to be some, giant ground sloth or something else. Even if you found giants, in the first place, who's out looking? Who's out digging in the dirt looking? It's generally people that have some kind of government grant, and their purpose is for their local university to help prove the evolution theory. Their motive is certainly not to prove creation. There aren't many people out digging looking for this stuff that are able to get their stuff published. That support creation is the point. And so more likely to be more people doing this research that they already come with a prejudice believing in evolution,
right,
as opposed to creation. So yeah, I think if giants were found of giant animals, giant people, it would tend to be discarded. Like, well, this can't be true. Or just don't publish it. Maybe hide it in the basement of the Smithsonian, or take it out and dump it in the, dump it in the ocean.
That's right.
They don't want it. They don't want it true. Here's why: evolution is the foundation philosophy and theory behind communism, socialism, Nazism, Marxism, the New World Order.
Mm-hmm.
Who makes the rules for planet Earth? Who decides what's right and wrong? Is it a group of men and women someplace that decide right and wrong, or is there a God? See, obviously we believe there's a God he decides right and wrong. I ask atheists in debates all the time. I say, if evolution is true, how do you tell right from wrong? On any topic, how do you tell right from wrong? They can't answer. Because under evolution theory, there's no such thing as right or wrong. Example, is it wrong for the lion to eat the baby zebra? Well, the lion doesn't think so. The zebra thinks it is, but the lion doesn't think so. How do you tell right from wrong? Okay.
That's a good question. I guess each person has to decide on their own. If they don't believe in God, they would have to make up their own mind what's right and wrong.
Well, a guy told me that in Canada one time. I was doing a speaking up there, and in a university, nobody would debate me, so I just spoke. And this one student stood up, and he said he was asking a bunch of questions. And I said, "Sir, if you believe in evolution, which you obviously do, how do you tell right from wrong?" He said, "That's easy." He said, "I decide what's right and wrong." He said, "I'm the God of my own universe." I said, "Man, I'm glad to hear about that, because I'm going to shoot you in 5." He said, "You can't do that." I said, "Sure I can. I'm the God of my own universe. I decided I should shoot you." Well, what's wrong with that logic? If evolution is true, there's no such thing as right or wrong.
Right.
That's the problem. That's why this theory of evolution is not only stupid, it's dangerous. We teach the kids they're nothing but an animal, and then we sit back and wonder, why are they acting like animals? Well, duh. You told them they're an animal.
Wow.
That's why they're acting like animals. Okay?
Yeah, it really has far-reaching implications, and that's why I think it's so important to really talk about this stuff. I mean, some people might say, even Christians might say, "Oh, what does it matter how old the earth is? As long as you trust in Jesus, you'll be okay."
Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning.
Yeah.
Matthew 19:4, Mark 10:6. If you want to trust in Jesus, okay, Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning. You trust in Jesus or not?
But why do you think there's so many Christians even who buy into the idea that the earth is millions of years old? Maybe they look at things like, they say, oh, maybe they counted the days differently or the years differently, or maybe they just didn't know any better about science. I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, I say, so they were stupid and we're smart. Okay, that's where they want to start with that assumption. Ancient man was dumb and modern man is smart. I would disagree with that premise to begin with.
Me too.
But certainly the Bible clearly teaches the people lived to be 900. Things were very different. And God made the world, and God decides what's right and wrong. So if somebody says, well, they were ancient people that didn't know any better, Jesus, is he in that category too? Because he said the creation of Adam was the beginning. The Bible clearly says nothing died until Adam sinned. Romans 5, 1 Corinthians 15. Man brought death into the world.
That's right.
Well, if man brought death into the world, then you can't say dinosaurs died before man got here.
Yeah, you got a little conundrum there, if you believe in that.
Most of them don't see it. When you point it out to them, they get a blank stare on their face like, whoa, I do believe something crazy, don't I? Yeah, you sure do.
Wow. There's so much we could go into here, but you know what? Another thing that really was helpful to me is how dinosaurs fit into the Bible, and the fact that ancient man had a different word for dinosaurs. And when you pointed that out to me, that the word dinosaur didn't come around until the 1800s, it really opened my eyes. Can you go into that, please? I think that's a very crucial point.
Well, yeah, dinosaur, that word was made up in 1840 by a guy named Sir Richard Owen. What it means is terrible lizard. They were finding the bones. See, in the early 1800s, they started developing, big earth-moving equipment. Before that, you had to use a shovel, and you just hard to dig a giant hole with a shovel. So there wasn't a whole lot of deep digging into the earth for big foundations for buildings, etc., until they started getting steam-powered, shovels and stuff like that. So in the 1800s, they began finding more of the giant bones. And really the question was, what is this thing anyway? It was pretty obvious by the anatomy that it was a lizard of some kind, like the iguanodon. They said it had a tooth. They said, this tooth is just like an iguana, only it's ginormous. So they named it the iguanodon, the huge iguana. They began finding these things, and, okay, now where do we put this? So finally, in 1841, they made up a brand new word, dinosaur. This is a terrible lizard, a giant lizard. Okay, I agree. Most of the dinosaurs were big lizards. Then they started coming up with a problem. Okay, well, these critters aren't alive today. We're finding them in the ground. How do we fit this into history? The Christians would say, well, it's very simple. These are from those that drowned in the flood. the flood probably formed all the fossils. Those who hated God and didn't want the Bible to be true and wanted to somehow pretend like the Bible's not going to be their judge one day, they started talking about, oh no, these are from millions of years ago. A pre-Adamic civilization. Well, now you got a problem. You got death before sin. Really, the question is pretty simple. What kind of God is there anyway? Did God create a perfect world and we messed it up? Or did God create a messed up world? Was death already here?
That's a big question. A good question. An important question.
A very important question. No, man brought death into the world.
So, the dinosaurs, what were they calling them before 1840?
They were called dragons.
Dragons, okay.
Dragons are mentioned in the Bible like 20 times.
They're described, too, and their descriptions fit, or seem to fit, modern dinosaurs.
Read Job, the book of Job, dead center in the Bible. Job chapter 40. God is asking Job 84 questions in chapter 38, 39, 40, and 41. In chapter 40, verse 15, God said, Job, behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eats grass as an ox. Okay, and then it says he's got a tail like a cedar tree. Well, some reference Bibles, put in the margin that this is an elephant or hippopotamus. Come on, guys, go look at the backside of an elephant or hippo. They don't have a tail like a cedar tree. That's for sure. It's describing, and it says he's the biggest animal God made. Well, that's not the elephant or hippo either. That'd be the Brachiosaurus or the Supersaurus or one of those big guys. So it's pretty obvious in Job 40, verse 15 to the end of the chapter, it's describing a dinosaur,
right? Probably
an Apatosaurus. Then when you read Job 41, it talks about another one called Leviathan. It says Leviathan lived with Job. Job could behold him. Job could see this creature. This is not millions of years ago. This is a creature living with Job. I believe it's probably the Tyrannosaurus rex, but that's just my guess based on the description. And it says he could breathe fire. Read Job 41. He could breathe fire.
That's amazing.
So I got a whole videotape on that one called Leviathan, the fire-breathing dragon.
Yes, that
explaining biologically how is this possible.
That was fascinating.
But the theory, my reasons for believing it probably was something like a T-Rex.
And so all throughout history, there are legends in almost every ancient culture about people encountering dragons. And today we might think it's, just fanciful, lore and legend that it wasn't true. But if you look at the biblical worldview and that these creatures were around all throughout history with people, they just called them different things. And the sheer volume of accounts of people interacting with so-called dragons, it makes perfect sense now that these were real animals. Friend, you're listening to Divine Intervention Radio, and I'm your host, Daniel Fazina. We're visiting with our special guest, Dr. Kent Hovind of Creation Science Evangelism. So, Dr. Hovind, can you comment on the many legends of dragons that persist all throughout history and ancient cultures?
Well, I've got a videotape that's 2 hours long called Dinosaurs in the Bible. It's on drdino.com, D-R-D-I-N-O, or they can call 855-BIG-DINO, and it's part of our seminar series. But not only did dinosaurs always live with man, probably just under a different name, there have been reported all through history. There are legends of people seeing dragons and ancient artwork and ancient cave paintings, etc. But there could be some still around today. It's amazing how many sightings there are of creatures like, for instance, the Loch Ness Monster. There are 11,000 people now that will go on record saying they have seen the Loch Ness Monster. Okay, well, are they all liars? Are they all stupid? Or could it be there really is something similar to maybe a plesiosaur still swimming around in Loch Ness? Of course, it's open to the ocean. It may just come and go for breeding grounds or something. I don't know. Plus, it's a very mountainous region with lots of caves called karst topography, K-A-R-S-T. It could go underground, in a cave up inside one of the mountains. But a guy called me yesterday. He said he was stationed in the Solomon Islands between Australia and, Borneo down in that region, Papua New Guinea. And he said the natives are afraid to go inland in one of these islands because of the giant creatures that live there. If you show them a picture of a dinosaur, they'll say, oh, yeah, that's the one. He lives out there. Don't go close. They're not friendly.
Wow.
There are many reports of dinosaurs still alive today in various places, like Lake Champlain Monster, Lake Okanagan in Canada. And my videotape number 3 has a whole 45 minutes, I believe, just on sightings and stories of what certainly appear to be dinosaurs. missionary friend of mine was in the Congo, Africa for years, 43 years as a missionary. The pygmies in his church said they had killed and eaten a small dinosaur.
Oh my gosh.
When he showed them a picture on a patasaurus, they said, yep, that's it. That's what we ate right there.
Wow. That is amazing. I've talked to people who've seen things in similar type, like Loch Ness Monster type creatures up by Niagara Falls in New York, actually. An acquaintance of mine had seen something similar to that. And plus, I've seen a lot of research, a lot of witness reports. I know you interviewed people like Sandy Mancy, who took the Lake Champlain monster photo in 1977. You talked to Dr. Cal Bombay, a missionary he was in Africa, and he saw a lizard, a 9-foot lizard with a frill on its back, walk across the road in Kenya. And you've probably talked to many people. How many witnesses do you think you've talked to that have seen something like a living dinosaur today?
I think I personally have talked to over 100 of them, but there are thousands of people who are making this same claim.
Wow.
That they've seen something that nothing else fits the description except the dinosaur.
That's
and
amazing.
From a Christian perspective, that's no problem. Of course there could be some dinosaurs still alive. They did not live millions of years ago. They're part of the normal creation. What's the big deal?
Right.
It's only those who believe in evolution that have a problem with this.
Right. And that's why when I first watched your video, I was under the impression that all dinosaurs were extinct. And you said there's a very important question that needs to be asked, basically, that not when did the dinosaurs go extinct, but did the dinosaurs go extinct? And you talk about some that could be still around today. That just blew my mind completely and just opened my eyes, and it really helped me, form my worldview and make it more solid. And now I'm very comfortable in my beliefs, and when I look at the world now, I understand it so much better. So thank you, Dr. Hovind, for all the work you've done and what you continue to do. It's really inspirational.
Well, you are welcome. Now, we don't want to get your listeners to get the wrong impression, like, boy, the world's full of dinosaurs. You got to be careful when you go to Walmart. That's not what we're saying. Okay?
No, they're very rare.
There have been, especially in remote parts of the world. The world today, a whole lot of it is unexplored.
Right.
Congo Swamp in Africa is still 80% unexplored. That's an area the size of Alabama.
Yeah.
That isn't explored yet. They've flown over with an airplane and mapped it. Well, that's the top of the trees, guys.
Yeah.
It's a swamp. And the natives say, oh, yeah, there's creatures in there that will eat you. Not crocodiles. There's creatures, well, they will too. There's creatures that even the crocodiles are afraid of.
Right. And when you talk about aquatic dinosaurs, I mean, you think about how much of the earth is covered with water. What, 3/4 of it, roughly? And
right. Uh-huh.
And I remember one of your famous lines from your video. You have someone flying over the Pacific Ocean say, "Man, it's huge," and you're like, "Yeah, that's just the top of it. It goes down pretty far, so that who knows what could be lurking in there." So it's fascinating stuff. Dr. Hovind, I want to thank you. We could talk all day about this kind of stuff, and there's so much to delve into, but unfortunately we're out of time. But again, I want to thank you so much for all the great work you're doing. I just want to encourage you to keep it up, and just God bless you, sir. And thank you again for taking time out to share on Divine Intervention Radio. Really appreciate it.
Sounds great. Have me on anytime. Thank you, brother.
Well, friend, that about does it for another episode of Divine Intervention Radio. Tune in next time as we bring you another exciting guest. And, of course, today's guest was Dr. Kent Hovind. Check out his website, drdino.com. I will talk to you next week. Take care, and God bless.
You've been listening to Divine Intervention with your host, Daniel Fazina. You can email Daniel at divineintervention@mail.com. That's divineintervention@mail.com. All programs of Divine Intervention are available online at divineinterventionradio.com. That's divineinterventionradio.com. Join us next time here on Divine Intervention.